Hello and welcome to Full Disclosure, a podcast project conceived entirely to let me spend more time than I'd ever get on the radio with interesting people. For people who are listening rather than watching, if I say there is no earthly way I could have interviewed either of these people separately, with the possible exception of Anton Deck, I suspect that Jayne Torvill and Christopher Dean will be the first names that pop into people's heads. So you're used to this. For me, it's quite odd. Is there an order? Jayne, is there a hierarchy? Do I direct the question to you first and then let Christopher fill in any gaps? Or
you know when they used to present us on the ice, yes, it would always be Jayne Torvill and Christopher Dean,
yes,
and in competition.
Yeah.
So that's how it always went. So when you see us from left to right,
that's
Jayne
how it
Torvill
works.
and
Jayne
Christopher
Torvill
Dean.
and Christopher Dean. Do you know, as I was slotting up on this before sitting down today, it did occur to me that you were the names do actually fit together very nicely. Torvill and Dean as surnames, and Jayne Torvill and Christopher Dean, they trip off the tongue. There was no question, I don't imagine, of doing it the other way around because it fits. But what if you'd been called like Gedgen Blenkinsop or something like that? It wouldn't have had, which is a good Nottinghamshire name, I think. Blenkinsop.
I have no idea if would have ever won the Olympics. The presenter wouldn't have been able to get the name out.
Doesn't have the same poetry to it. But we will begin in Nottingham, and we'll do a little bit on the years before you met. And I'll start with you, Christopher, because you're from a mining family. Your dad was a coal miner.
Absolutely.
So, as I'm sure I'm the millionth interviewer to observe, there's a world of difference between what your dad did for a living and what you ended up doing.
Yeah, I mean, we lived on a council estate, and there was a top end and bottom end of the council estate. And everybody I knew at school was ultimately going to go down the pits. You know, what you're doing when you finish, going down the pits. And one day I did a Duke of Edinburgh award scheme, and it was a bronze award. Part of that was to introduce to a service of some kind, and the police came, and I think it was actually a dog handler. He didn't bring his dog, but he talked about the police, and sort of a light bulb went off in my head. I'm like, this sounds really interesting. I'd maybe like to join the police force. And so when I left school at 15 and a half, 2 weeks after leaving school, I was a police cadet, and that started my police career from there. But I'd started skating when I was 10.
We'll get to that. Had you had an aversion to going down the pit? Had you thought to yourself, this isn't really for me? Because it was back-breaking work. And
yeah, I mean, underground, which my dad was to begin with.
Yeah.
He was underground for 20 plus years, but then he came up after having a heart attack and was an electrician. But it was a safe job, at that time. It was a career job. You were going to do it, and you were going to do it for the rest of your life. It was, there was unions, and it was.
But not for you.
No. Wasn't good. I was quite athletic as well.
You were brilliant at football, weren't you?
I was quite good at football. I was team captain, and that was going to be something I might pursue. But then my stepmother at the time thought that I lived in this little mining village and that it would be good to get out of the village and maybe see a bit more of the world. So we went to Nottingham, 10 miles away. Having said that, it could have been 100 miles away, because to get there you'd have to get on the bus, and the bus ran every 3 hours perhaps. So anyway, I got a pair of ice skates for Christmas, and walked around in them for about 2 weeks before they even hit the ice. But I was, the minute I walked into the building, the smell of it, the look of it, I've always loved snow. And for me, it was like a winter wonderland walking into this place. And I always, every building has a smell.
Yes.
And I always remember the Nottingham ice rink as having this smell, and it's still with me today. And
it's not like other ice rinks. There's not like a multi-purpose ice rink smell.
No, it was specific to Nottingham ice rink. It was this big cavernous building space, and it was damp. And
it had a bit of a damp smell to it.
Yeah, but as you walked in the foyer, you sort of go upstairs to the rink, and there's this beautiful mural that had been painted of like a Davos mountains and these two leaping skaters, and I thought, that looks so exotic. And this is as a kid, but then when you see them skating around on the ice, that was for me. That's what I wanted to do
in the moment. I mean, completely transported. Was it the same for you, Jayne? Was it your first sniff of the ice was smitten for life?
No, I first went on a school trip, at primary school, and I was about 8 years old, and the teacher thought she'd organise a trip to the local ice rink, because luckily we lived in Nottingham. There's not many ice rinks around the country even. So off we went. I think it was a Friday afternoon. And I just remember stepping on the ice and just enjoying it. And it wasn't like I had this amazing talent straight away, but I did. We had a coach for the group of us, and I was listening to her, and I had a sense of balance. You know, some people are quite wobbly, but I did have a sense of balance. And then I found myself looking at the rest of the ice rink where the good skaters were, and I was watching them doing various things, little jumps or spins or whatever. And I kept thinking, oh, I'd love to do that. I want to do that. So I just kept watching. And the teacher that was with us after the second week we went, she said, oh, you should come on a Saturday morning because there's another group session. So I pestered my parents and they took me along. And it just went from there because then I wanted my own skates and because I didn't like the higher skates because they were either blue or brown, and I could see the good skaters in their nice white ice skates.
So there's someone else's sweaty old feet in them as well, half an hour previously.
And then my parents eventually said, well, you can have a pair of skates, but we'll buy... They used to sell second-hand pairs because obviously little kids' feet grow and so on. So I had... My first pair of skates was a second-hand pair, and my mum famously said... Well, you're not getting new skates because you might not carry on. I'm still doing it.
Yeah. How quickly did people mark you out? How quickly did people say to your mum, she's got something, I think?
I don't think people did in those days. I think I just loved it. And then the next thing, I wanted to have lessons. And I pestered my parents, could I have a lesson? And I had a lesson once a week for quite a period of time with the lady that had taken the group class, who, funnily enough, recently her granddaughter got in touch to ask if we could meet her, my first coach, when we go to Nottingham on the tour.
Oh,
because she's sort of in her 80s now. And I'm just amazed that she's still around, and it will be so wonderful to meet her.
When we first started though, and we started going on a regular occasion before we were skating, the ice rink, or let's start back, there was a session on a Thursday which was called Dance Club, and these older dancers and younger skaters all got together, and the organist actually played,
an organ then.
and then his wife would turn the pages as he was playing, would play the dancers, and you get to skate with various other people. But it was such a social occasion for parents because there was a bar in the rink.
Okay.
So none of the parents watched what was going on.
They were down.
They would go downstairs and have a drink. So it was for them. It was an outing as well. That was sort of that period. That's how it was, wasn't it? Yeah.
But it creates an atmosphere as well, because I was going to mention that they're a bit like nightclubs.
Yeah,
with the music and the lights, and it's dark and there's no windows, and because I used to go to the Silver Blades in Edgbaston, where I think Robin Cousins did his.
Started in Bristol.
No, John Curry. Who was the
John Curry?
There's a big picture of John Curry in the Silver Blades as well.
Yeah.
But it felt like you were going.
Is that one where you walk upstairs?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
yes.
we've skated there.
Exactly there,
yeah.
and it was like a night spot, more glamorous than perhaps people realise who've only seen it through the sport on the telly.
That's right. Yeah, no, I think a lot of people just go there as a social thing to go and skate round, and it was a good place to meet young ladies.
Well, yeah, especially at an all-boys boarding school. Unfortunately,
rink rats we called them.
I was very wobbly, unfortunately. Because I tried to go backwards once. It didn't end well. So we're kind of jumping, but I am interested in other options. So you mentioned leaving school at 15 and a half. Did you leave at 16 as well?
Yes.
Were you putting all your eggs in that basket by then? Were you pursuing, or you just didn't fancy school much?
We must have. Had we just started skating together then?
I didn't have an option. I wasn't going to college.
But you're not?
Yeah, I think, because I remember you going to the cadets. So we had started skating together and didn't know where any of it was going to lead. It was still a hobby for both of us at
because
that point.
You just really liked it.
Yeah. And I had to find a job, and I didn't know what I wanted to do. So there was a couple of offers that came into the school. They were looking for people here and there. And I just went for the Norwich Union Insurance Company that was in the square in Nottingham. And that's where I first started work at the age of 16.
And so it was literally need a job, pay the bills.
Yeah,
ice skating is fun.
It was something that Jayne had a partner. She'd been successful already. She'd been a British champion at pair skating, not ice dancing, but at the age of 13. But then her partner wanted to go off to London to find a better skater, and I had a partner, and she went off to London to find a better skater.
Yeah,
really?
So we were on the has-been pile, and then our coach, or my coach that came up to coach me and my partner, she left. She was left with me then. She said, "Why don't you try with Jayne?" And I'm like, well, she was a pair skater and she's a single skater, and I don't
not
think
an ice dancer.
She wouldn't be an ice dancer anyway. I said, we'll give it a go. And we did. We got together one Thursday morning at about 6 a.m. And the first thing the coach did was put us together, made our bellies touch, go into dance hold and just look at each other. And then she said, I've just left something in my dressing room. She disappeared for like 5 minutes and left us there. And we just stood there.
We didn't look at each other.
Not quite knowing where to look. But I think we passed the test.
Well, because you've both described each other as being quite shy. And that would seem to prove it, that little vignette there. Of
Yeah. I mean, we kind of knew each other from the rink.
Of course.
But being put together like that, and her point was that, with ice dancing, when you're doing what used to be compulsory dances, the idea is to keep as close together as possible and hips touching almost, because that gives a better line and flow. And that's why she did that exercise in that moment. But I swear we probably didn't say one word to each other until she came back.
We weren't very outgoing.
No.
Was there chemistry though? Once you started skating together, or am I over romanticising?
Yeah, I wouldn't say there was chemistry, but what there was is the will that we wanted to do it. We wanted,
and you recognise that in each other.
Yeah, we. I think we did actually, because having had the experience of previous partners, it was different with Chris.
Right.
He was very driven, and I liked that because I was driven, but in a different way. But I think we both, like Chris always says, we're a bit yin and yang in the way that we work together.
Yes, in complement. So then I'll go back to one of my earlier questions. When did people earmark you as a pair as something a bit special? When did people start saying, hang on a minute, this one's a bit out of the ordinary?
I think we were under the radar. And then we did a British Championships, but I think it was, there's this young couple from Nottingham that looked quite good.
Okay.
And that was the first time. But then a year later, we were picked to be part of the British team.
We came third, and there was 3 couples that went as part of the
European and World Championships. And so they give you a blazer with a badge on that's saying you're a team member now, and that
very
first
special.
badge
Yeah.
was like, that was a mark of you've made it.
Yeah.
You're representing the country at World Championships at skating.
There's a confidence attached to this, for even if you describe yourselves as shy, that you found something that you love. It's not something that's obviously popular. I don't know what your mates in the police force would have made of you going off doing ice dancing.
You can imagine.
I can. Yes. to begin with. But you must have been I think the phrase is self-possessed, and you must have recognised that in each other. Here are 2 people who know what they want, even though it's something that not many other people want.
Yeah, I think so. I think we knew what our passion was, and we both had that, and I think we saw early on that we both had it. I mean, there was a period where Chris had to go away to complete your training, and
it was,
and there was this period, and Chris sort of said to me something along the lines of, if you can't wait for me to do this, and you want to skate with someone else now, because this was quite early on. And I said, no, I don't, I'll wait. And we kind of...
We didn't really wait, because we
scrambled together, didn't we? Every weekend,
yeah. Because I'd go up to Dishforth, which was like a 2-hour drive up from Nottingham. And, it was like a prison camp for the week. Yeah. And then they let you back out. And we'd come at home and skate all the hours that we could, like from 10 o'clock at night.
We skated Friday through Sunday.
We had a key.
Yeah,
and then we had to go.
And then we had to clean the ice afterwards, because there was figure skating where they put patterns on the ice.
Yeah.
So I had to drive the Zamboni and clean the ice, which was no mean feat, because this Zamboni is like this 2-ton thing. And then it had to come out on these metal heavy ramps to support it, and we had to sort of get them out, line them up, and Jayne had to like guide me on like an aircraft. And it was the scariest thing, because if it lost its ramp, you're like £40,000 worth of damage.
It's incredible.
I'd do the ice, get it off, and leave it ready for the next morning, and lock up for the people coming in earlier on.
What were you aiming for then at this point, right here, early days? You're competing already, you're making some waves in competition, but that level of commitment, to be coming back from Dishforth, to be driving the Zamboni, to be using every possible hour that you're not at work or asleep, you're essentially trying to get on the ice together. What was at the end of the tunnel?
I have a feeling that we had been chosen to do our first international competition to represent Great Britain. It wasn't a European or World Championship, it was an international, as they called it.
Sure.
And I think that was coming up in our future, and so that's why we continue to try and train at the
These
weekends.
two competitions, it was Morzine and Oberstdorf, wasn't it? Yes, it was. Saint-Gervais and Oberstdorf.
Yeah, so one in France, one in Germany.
We won one and came second in another.
Yeah.
And they were sort of like precursors to going on to European everybody that had done well in them then went on to do well at Worlds and Europeans thereafter.
But we were
surprised.
I think
that was a marker to say, to
be second and first in our first two international competitions was quite a big deal.
Yeah, that's quite an announcement.
Didn't expect that going into it, did we?
No.
So.
When did you? I mean, when you started doing competitions and you started watching other couples, did you sort of feel your confidence grow? Did you think, hang on a minute, we've got something here that other people haven't got?
I think we watched. I always remember going to our first European Championship, and prior to that, we'd only watched the good skaters on the TV.
Yes, of course.
And our coach said,
Moiseev,
the Russian team were our favourites, and our coach said to us that the best thing you can do is watch when you've done your training session. Stay behind and watch the other training session, the other groups that you're competing against. And she said that you will see some of the best skaters, but you'll also see others that aren't so good, and learn from that as well. Learn why they're not as good.
You're
because
soaking everything up.
Just sponges.
But it was surreal, because when you've been sat at home watching these skating stars on TV,
and you're in the same building,
you're in the same arena and competing against them, and eventually, a year or so later, beating them. That was.
It was surreal.
It was. Yeah, we never. Thought
and the gradient was that steep, was it? You started knocking it out of the park really quickly.
Yeah.
Why was that, Chris? What was it that happened?
I guess we were fresh.
Yes.
It was dominated by Russia at that time. It was always top three couples were Russian or a Hungarian, and we represented something different. We were. They said, "Oh, you're the Western skaters, rather than the Eastern Bloc skaters," and it was a different style.
Yeah.
And so I think we got some momentum, and this sport's very subjective. It's a whole lot of judges. It's not how fast or how high or how long you do something. It's what appeals, and also at that time, still is, there were politics to play within the sport as well, and so everything you did was an impression. Off the ice, on the ice, how you carried yourself at that time. You were being judged all the time, weren't you? And so eventually, our coach Betty Calloway she was our guru of teaching us some etiquette.
Just to know, if you can, and I know you will have both been asked this a million times, but when the difference between skating alone, skating with a different partner, and then when you began to create your magic together, what is it? What is the feeling? What is it? Is it Douglas Adams, the author, once described, when he was writing brilliantly, he described it as throwing himself at the floor and missing, as if he just soared off into the. Now you can't do that when you're ice skating for obvious reasons. But how do you describe it to someone who's not got it, not done it? What
you
is
mean
when things are going absolutely brilliant?
I think there's a sense. What we try to do when you're starting to choreograph something, everything's difficult because you're not trying to find the ease. You're trying to find originality, and originality means different, and so it feels uncomfortable. And so what you're trying to do is make everything feel seamless and not rushed. And it's always there, and you know what you're doing, and your body's doing it automatically, which is then allowing your brain to emote more, because the body's doing what you need to do, and so you can be in the moment.
Right.
And so it's finding that fluidity and smoothness of all the movement and how it works, and putting that together as two people moving together. You're trying to find a synergy together, unison.
And when you're in it, you feel it.
Yes.
Yes, and when it's not working, you feel it too.
I'm sure.
You get that relationship that
and that's
you know.
why we practice so much.
Yeah.
To make it look effortless.
Yeah.
Even though every practice is effortful.
Yeah, absolutely.
Until
No, I
suddenly.
mean, it's the thing is, we've been doing it a long time, but it's all been physical.
Yeah.
It's always physical. It's literally physical.
Yes.
Your body, your muscles, your brain is all working at the same time.
So presumably, quite quickly, the pressure on the other bits of your lives, you'll think we would like to go all in on the skating. We want to give up the day jobs.
Yeah, well,
Not as easy as it sounds, and certainly compared to the people you were competing against.
they were already full-time skaters. Certainly the Eastern Bloc countries, that their competitors were always sort of in the Navy, in the Army, that then trained full-time. And for us, we had to work to be able to pay for our training. But we saved enough money that we thought that would get us through 6 months, which would get us through to the European and World Championships, and we'll see where we're at.
I think
this was in 1979, 1980.
1980 was our first Olympics, which in itself was a big moment. And we finished 5th.
That was Lake Placid.
Yes, Lake Placid. And there were 2 couples ahead of us that we knew were going to retire. So then we became on paper the 3rd.
Okay.
And that's when we thought, we have to give this every shot next year. And that's why we decided to give up our jobs. And as Chris said, we'd saved enough money to be able to go and train at this amazing facility in Germany.
And in the meantime, we tried to gain sponsorship, but we went to companies and said, would you sponsor us? And they say, what do we get in return? We say, we can't give you anything in return.
Because we were amateur.
It was
truly
truly amateur at that
Yeah.
time, so you couldn't wear any
wear a
logos
logo.
or promote anything. And during that period, somebody had said to Jayne, try the council, because there's some money there that they put away for the 1980 Olympics that never got used because we didn't go to those Olympics, so they were boycotted. And so out of the blue, you'd done this like several months earlier, we got a call from Radio Nottingham saying, congratulations, you got your grant. And we thought,
And we didn't know because we were away from home. weren't
No,
we?
we were as surprised as anybody to hear about it. But it wasn't just for 1 year, it was for 4 years.
Right up
and
to 84.
That was like
It's a huge game changer then.
game changer. And then what happened, 1981, we won the World Championships.
Right.
We won it 3 years too early, we thought.
Well, we didn't expect to win. We thought we'd get
Be
a bronze
third.
medal. But
You mean you had a schedule?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
That's,
so we won the World Championships in 1981, and now the big thing was sustaining it for the next 3 years to 1984.
But it was great for the city council, because anybody that had any qualms about them giving us this lump sum of money,
of course.
it just killed anything. I mean, most people were very supportive, but there was the odd person that questioned, why are you giving all this money to one couple where it was meant to be for a team of Olympians?
Why do you think they did?
They had it. It was there.
So
And
just
I think they...
serendipity, really.
Absolutely. It was
Yeah.
one of those moments that just happened.
There's a few moments like this for you two, isn't there? There's the
There's
coming
lots of
together.
sliding doors, aren't
Yes,
there?
the millions. I hadn't realised
Yeah.
that. The coach being in the right place at the right time,
Yeah.
just getting the skates for your birthday, being in Nottingham where there was a big rink, all of these.
Us two meeting.
Yes,
Yeah.
all of those things
Yeah.
that things could have been very, very different.
Yeah.
What
yeah.
would you have done?
I'd have most probably retired now,
Yes.
doing a second job
Yes.
with my pension.
Yeah.
I was going to say, you'd still be in the police, wouldn't you?
You would have
You'd been in
thought
the
so.
police.
What would you have done, Jayne? I mean,
Married,
I
got
have
kids.
I probably would have got married sooner and
Yes.
started a family.
Yeah. It's a completely different courses.
But yeah,
no,
different.
wouldn't change it for a thing, though.
Well,
No.
not surprised.
No.
We're knocking at the door now of the legendary status that you'd shortly achieve. Were you now? So you mentioned that sounds quite calculating in a good way. You can't treat this like a kind of like a rehearsal, can you? So you're thinking we should be world champions, we should be European champions by 1980 blank, and we should be really pushing for gold in 84.
Well, to be honest, it was a shock for us winning the European and
Right.
World Championships in 1981.
Yeah.
Yes.
But having won, that gives you a whole new sense of how you are as champions, because you're not underdogs, you're not challenging, you are the champions. And so we took that on very much in everything that we did, had to be the best that we could do it, from music, costumes, training,
right.
every aspect of what we were doing. We pushed it to the best we could make it, to the most that we could afford. And it was, you never miss rehearsals, practices. You get your music done on time. You schedule. You stay to that schedule. So all of those elements, that was our focus. It was tunnel focus.
These then are the moments when, if any tensions were going to creep in, it would have been now. Actually, it would have been when you both decided to go, or if either one of you was holding back a bit or not producing. Then
we were on the ride together.
You were completely lockstep.
Definitely. I mean, we were so excited and happy when we received the grant that we could go and train and not worry about anything, not worry about where the money's coming from, and not worry about do we have enough training time and so on.
That afforded us to go to Germany, which is a training facility
centre.
that we could skate all day long. When we're in Nottingham was very good to us, but it was from 10 o'clock at night till 6 in the morning. It was those hours.
There was grabs here and there, wasn't there?
Yeah, because it was a functioning rink that had to pay its bills,
yeah.
and so they had to have public sessions. Whereas in Oberstdorf in Bavaria, it was dedicated for full-time training.
The German team.
Yeah,
training.
so we went there, and it just changed our life. But having been in that situation in Nottingham, ice was precious. It wasn't just like you got oodles of ice, you skate when you want, for us it was precious. And so that when we did have all of that time,
if we had a 2-hour session,
we used that 2 hours.
We used it all.
And still joyous.
Because it was like a gift, wasn't it? It was all this space, all
it
this
was
clear
hard
ice.
work.
Yeah,
and
it was hard
you'd
work.
have your days that you have to have your days that nothing works. But then if nothing works, you know what doesn't work. So you have to turn that into a positive.
Yeah.
And we always wanted to leave the ice with something that we gained that day, that we gained something from that rehearsal, from that training session.
And how normal was it to be in wanting to be in control of every aspect of it? Were some of the people you were up against, particularly the Eastern Europeans, seem a bit more production line or a bit more...
We always felt that they had a lot of support.
Yes.
They'd have physios and doctors and team managers.
Quite
and
ahead
things
of the
like
curve
that.
on stuff like that.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
I mean, it was manufactured that... But they had an incentive that they would benefit within their system.
Yes.
That was their motivation,
their
I think.
incentive, yeah.
Elevation within their society. And for us, our motivation was just to be successful and...
To be the best you could be.
Best that we could be,
I think having
So there's less pressure in a way.
In a way, but I think the pressure on us was that if you're a world champion, there's only one way to go, and that's down. So we had to stay on top of it, and I think we learnt that in conversations with our coach, etc., that you can't just sit there and do the same thing again year after year, because someone will be watching and will be trying to beat you. So we, in itself, we were competitive with ourselves because we wanted to do something different. So that's why each year we came up with a new sort of theme and telling stories, etc.
Yeah, we were looking for different ways to move all the time on the ice, and at the same time relating that somebody watching can go, oh yeah, I understand what that is. We did something called Mac and Mabel, which was sort of silent movie, and throughout
this was all quite revolutionary, though, wasn't it?
It was,
It was different because we were using, with Mac and Mabel in particular, we were using one piece of music, if you like, the overture.
Yes.
Whereas even when we won in '81, we were doing what everyone had been doing for years, starting with a fast piece, having a slow piece in the middle to catch your breath, and then do a fast piece at the end to finish with a bang. And neither of those 3 or 4 pieces of music related to each other in any way, only in that they had a dance rhythm. Whereas with Mac and Mabel,
there was a theme through.
It was like this, and it had a theme and a story.
And this is how you changed the sport, really, isn't it?
Yeah, like I say, we decided to take every aspect of it and move it up a stage. And by the time we got to Bolero, we had an arranger arrange the music. We went into a studio and worked with musicians and editors that would put this music together. Our costumes were created bespoke for us. We used to have 3 sets of blades that we'd skate on, because they're so important. The sharpening of the blade. It's micro millimeters that if it's out, it changes everything. So we had a specific person that would sharpen them, Mr. Podolsky in Oberstdorf. We'd have 3 pairs and we'd rotate. We'd send them wherever we were in the world back to him. We'd have 2 with us and we'd rotate them through like that. So every aspect about you, it's all geared to those 4 minutes on the ice.
But it's also tiny, every little tiny improvement adds up. If you have, so it's what the Dave Brailsford, the cycling coach, became famous for, was talking about having 10 or 50 tiny improvements adding up to one bit. You were doing that 20 years.
It's like Formula One nowadays as well.
Yes,
there's no big change. It's all those micro things, and I think that's what we took in our life.
I didn't know that.
And put all those bits together.
Did you become famous after the '81 victories? Did you start getting because that would be telly and proper recognition?
Yeah, within the skating world, and then certainly when we were back home in Nottingham, we did. But we were always very conscious, and there wasn't anything like there is today. But
social media didn't exist.
Very conscious of not getting caught up with attending events and balls and that we were invited to, because it would take away from training if it was a normal week. And we didn't want to miss a training session the next morning. We wouldn't go to events that we'd been invited to.
It's that engineered. If you missed one training session, you'd feel it at your next competition.
That was the most important thing.
Certainly at that stage, because 81 was a big moment, and then we got 3 years ahead of us, and we couldn't afford to mess up. If you like.
I hadn't. Yeah, that's fascinating. The idea that in a way, winning it in '81 was a mixed blessing.
It certainly was from our point of view. I mean, it was. In hindsight, you can look back and go, wow, that was amazing, and it kept us up there. But, the start of every season was like, deep breath, here we go, what is it going to be? And you never knew how it's going to be received, and that's why we would put so much effort and time
into everything
for precision of that and performance of that. Yeah.
So how did that work? Did you have false starts? Did you have themes? If you were, say, the year that you came up with Mac and Mabel, would you have done 2 or 3 other things before that, or had thoughts that hadn't quite landed right? Or
we had found that music the year before, hadn't we?
Yeah.
And you just know. You think, this is for us.
We were very lucky because we had access to Radio Nottingham's library.
You are children of Nottingham, aren't you? This is
and it was a music, like it was vinyl, LPs, racks and racks.
That was like a massive gift, wasn't it? That they let us go in.
We tried to go into record stores to begin with.
Yeah.
And can we hear this? And they wouldn't sample at that time.
Well, if they did, it was only 1 or 2 records at the most that you could listen to, and we couldn't afford to buy loads of records that were no good.
The Spotify generation are listening to this thinking,
they have no idea.
What are they talking about?
Talking about?
We just couldn't afford to buy
access to vinyl. Is another moment of slight. I mean, if you hadn't had that,
when we were in Radio Nottingham, there was 2 players and racks of music, and we were there after training. We would go there every day. For weeks on end,
searching for the perfect piece of music.
Yeah.
What were you? I mean, could you put into words what you were looking for, or would you just know it when you heard it?
No,
we'd look at we did like the idea of musicals and shows
to begin with,
and that's where we came across Mac and Mabel, which we didn't know much about, but when we played it, we really liked the music. But at that point, we decided, because this was leading up to 81,
yes,
for some reason, we said, I don't think we're ready for that.
Gosh.
Or it wasn't right.
Or
yet.
it wasn't right for us at that time. But then, having won in 81, we pretty much went straight back and grabbed it, didn't we? Because we thought this, because we were leading the way at that point then. We could afford to go off in another direction and not necessarily conform to what was the conventional way of doing it. So.
Which then led us to 1980, that was 82, 83. Yeah. After the 82 championships, which was in Europe, they then do a tour of Europe with all the champions for about 2 weeks. And we were in Moscow, and then there was an opportunity to go and see the Bolshoi or the circus. Well, everybody wanted the Bolshoi, and I went, I think I'd like to go to the circus. Because something went off in my head. And then when I came back from that, I said to Jayne, next year it's a circus theme, it's Barnum. And she was like, oh, okay. Anyway, we got back home. Straight away, Barnum was on in the West End.
Of course, with Michael
we went
Crawford.
there, Michael Crawford saw us. We
it's
said
kind of
hello.
all meant to be,
It's
wasn't
mad,
it?
isn't it, this? I had no idea.
Hence Barnum.
Yeah.
And I think Michael Crawford sort of gave you some
Yes.
guidance and advice as well.
He saw that we were in the audience, and it was probably not long after we'd won, because we immediately started working on the next season. And he invited us backstage after, and so we chatted to him, and then we sort of talked about, or Chris said, we're thinking of using this music, but it's really difficult to, the overture is too long.
They didn't have a really overture though.
They hadn't got an overture, and what they had got was too long, or something like that. So then he introduced us to his musical director, Mike Reed, who then we set up a meeting to discuss what we wanted.
So he arranged a piece 4 minutes long, used his musicians from the orchestra. They gave their time free. We just had to pay for the studio costs. And Barnum arrived.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
And quite soon after starting that you've got another smash on your hands, do you? You kind of, the pieces slot
I think
into
those
place?
two pieces, not so much, well, maybe Macamé, but I think those two pieces, I think when we got to Bolero, when it was first seen, most people was like, oh, that's so different. That's like, oh, I don't know how to feel about that to begin with. But I think once they'd watched it once, then it became something else. And then when you put it in a big arena with a lot of people that feel that they're watching something very special, we wanted to make it very intimate, very personal, that it wasn't one of these numbers where you're throwing your arms out to the audience. It was just the two of us. And it was about the contact that we had and how we performed to each other, that people felt that they were watching something very intimate and special. And it was a love story. It's a Romeo and Juliet. We had a narrative in our head what it was. We weren't trying to portray that, but it was these two people that couldn't be together, that ultimately would be together in death. So
I'm back to that first meeting now. I don't know why, you just conjured it back up in my mind when the coach left you holding each other in the middle.
Finally we could look at each other.
Finally said hello. And so you did it. I mean, you kept up the victories, didn't you? You did that 3-year trajectory where...
The only time we missed was in 83. We missed a European Championship because I got injured in training. We had a nasty fall, didn't we? And I fractured my shoulder blade.
Which in a sense is a big deal, because the Europeans were really a precursor of what would happen in the world at that time, because whoever the European champions, usually European skaters, were World Championship skaters, and obviously our competitors were Russian, and so they won that European, so we knew that we had to go to that Worlds being bigger and better and
that
fitter.
suited you both, though, that I think, didn't it? That is that knowledge that you were the ones to watch. You were turning up with the
we had to be better than we thought we would have been if we hadn't been to Europeans.
We were super fit because we'd had extra training, even though I had to look after my shoulder and do lots of.
We had bandaging, so we disguised that as much as possible.
Oh, that was it. I
so
went to Worlds with bandages, tapes on my shoulder. But we didn't want to, because if you've had this feeling, if you had some injury that you were a bit vulnerable,
or there was a negative,
that they might not be that good then because she's got that injury.
Psychology as well. Then. So I mean, it's another facet of
absolutely.
Well, we see the 4-minute moment on the telly, but actually it is like Formula One. There's a million different elements of engineering that have gone into creating those. Yeah,
and getting to that
brief
point
moments.
And convincing everybody that we're as good as we were before and that their injury has not been a problem.
So we're heading towards Sarajevo now. We're heading towards the beginning of 1984. What had changed off the rink? I mean, how had your lives changed? Or were you just focused completely on the ice?
No, we didn't change much at all, did we?
No, because we didn't spend a lot of time in the UK.
Right.
And again, tried not to get pulled into lots of events and so on.
No one had led the way really for you, had they? In terms of
no, I guess not. But we
when you say that, not in ice dance. I mean, in 1976, John Curry won the Olympics.
Yes.
80,
Robin Cousins won the Olympics. So from that aspect, those preceding 2 Olympics, there was been a gold for figure skating. But not in ice dance.
No, and not for doubles, not for
not for partnerships. And so. I mean, we felt like we were a very small team. It was a team of 2, and that was it. We didn't really carry any. I mean, our coach, we self-taught ourselves most of the time as well.
Right.
That Betty Calloway, we would train for 6 weeks, and then she would come in for a week, see what we were doing, and go away. So, I whenever I choreograph or coach students now, I'm not that coach that you must be doing this, you must be doing that. You've got to want to do it for yourself, and that's how we worked. But
she encouraged that as well, didn't she?
Very much so. It
wasn't like
discipline.
If we made a mistake with a compulsory dance, as they were in those days,
figure it out.
She would say, we'd go back and go, and she'd say, well, go and figure it out. She wouldn't sort of tell us. We see a lot of coaches that say, no, do this, do that,
my way or the highway.
And also it tends to be that the students will be like, I don't know what happened, I have to go and talk to my coach for them to tell me.
But they need to know what happened to correct it.
Yes. Neither of you were the cautious partner then, I don't sense. So neither one of you was ever saying, but maybe we should tone things down a bit, or maybe we should. So you were both on this sort of soaring trajectory.
Bigger
completely,
and better.
Completely tied. I mean, again, I'd probably the millionth person to have asked you about this, but the intensity of your relationship, especially when you were away from home, you're incredibly reliant on each other.
We were.
We were, and I think, when I listen to stories of other Olympians or athletes, when they're the one person on their own, I think we were lucky to have each other, because either of us could have been single skaters, and that's a different thing, because you go into the rink one day and think, I'm not going to practice my triple salto today because I don't really feel like it. But when you've got a partner, you can't say, I'm not doing that run through today because I don't feel it. You do it for each other.
Yes.
So
there's 2 sides to it, isn't there? There's you need to do it for each other, but you also have to be the person that the other person can rely on. So it's completely symbiotic. It's a complete.
Yeah. And I think that's what's forged our longevity as well. That we've gone through so much.
No one else knows what it's like to be either one of you except each other.
That's right. Yeah.
But it's also nice that when someone wins the Olympics and they're on their own, they say, how does it feel? And quite often you can't describe how it feels, but we know how it felt because there were 2 of us, kind of thing. So that's nice.
And the Olympic gold, that was because by now you've got mantelpieces full of medals by the time we get to February 84. But the Olympic gold was the thing that mattered most, I think.
That's what we were aiming for.
Always.
That was sort of the...
Why? It's just because that's the pinnacle of
we'd won the World Championships, we'd won the European Championships, and we just hadn't won the Olympics. So
you needed it.
Yeah, and you know, it is the biggest sporting event for athletes to be there and ready on that one day for that 4 minutes every 4 years. Yeah.
I watched it last night.
Did you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's bonkers. It's so beautiful.
Oh,
it's
thank
so
you.
extra. But even now, you know, and it's part of our cultural furniture as a country, isn't it? I hope there's no spoiler alerts here. I hope people know you won.
We do have an awful lot of people who will come up to us and say, I remember where I was when you won the Olympics, or they'll have a special story of what happened on that day, and they remember it. And so that's it's getting more and more now that 20-year-olds are coming over and say, my gran remembers where she
grandma
was.
It's always a moment. Because it's not just ice skating history or even Olympic history, it's British history that you achieved that night.
Yeah,
So,
I do feel a nation, you know, you feel it when I remember the World Cup when I was only 8 then, and it still stays with me.
Yeah.
You remember those moments of great success. You remember Super Saturday at the Olympics, don't you? And I think a nation enjoys those moments of, you know, when it's a world success.
And yet, I mean, Robin Cousins and John Curry notwithstanding, it wasn't a sport that we felt we had much ownership of.
No.
The Russians had dominated it for the best part of a decade and a half and continue to be your biggest rivals. So something happened in that moment. I mean, something weird, something like alchemy happened.
Well, I think two things happened. BBC and ITV both showed the event.
Yeah.
They were both there.
So you couldn't avoid it.
No.
It was normally
and at that
just
time,
the BBC, wasn't it?
We didn't have Netflix and all of the podcasts and everything else going on.
Yeah.
It was 3 channels, or was Channel 4? There was 4 channels then. And, you know, everybody watched it.
24 million, a rough estimate, people all tuned in.
Yeah, no, it's very special.
And you smashed it. And then, because I want to get on to the tour that you're going on next year, because then you went pro almost straight away. You did one more Worlds. So there was never any temptation to go back and defend your title, or? Not
at that time, no. It's, you know, once you've done it's repetition then. Yeah. And so for us, the next thing was to go professional, but also we wanted to express ourselves as well, and not have the confines of the regulations of competition. And
which
so
you pushed about as far as you reasonably could with Bolero. Right?
Yeah. Really. So we wanted to then do other things with more skaters and make it entertaining.
Have our own company of skaters.
And you did.
Like.
And did you find that as fulfilling? Did it in different ways?
Absolutely.
Even though you haven't got the measure, you know, because you mentioned it being a subjective sport, which it clearly is, but medals are objective, aren't they? You know, we are the world champions, that's objective. We are the Olympic champions, that's objective. Yeah. We've just done a beautiful, beautiful show that thousands and thousands of people loved. That's not objective.
No.
In quite the same way. You don't have the scale to set yourself against.
No, but I think creatively,
yes,
it was stimulating for us.
It's definitely,
it was harder than working for an Olympics.
Ah, gosh!
Because we were performing 8 shows a week, and we were doing every number that we'd done in competition,
several numbers within
every
the show.
night that you do once a day.
Yeah, of course.
And so physically, for a year and a half, that was the hardest thing we'd ever done.
Whereas in competition, when we got to the higher level, we would do a British Championship, European Championship and Worlds, and then obviously 84 the Olympics.
Years,
so, you know, only those 4 events where you actually had to go and
we were doing those every night.
But we were doing those routines every night.
So again, you're pushing. The only people you're really answering to are yourselves and each other. That's really all you're doing, is pushing yourselves and pushing each other to points of improvement and achievement and fulfillment.
And we also wanted a sense of giving back as well.
Yes.
People have they've spent that money to come and see you.
Yes.
So we wanted to give them
as much as we could.
Yeah.
You've written your own rule books pretty much from the moment you met, haven't you? Really?
Well, when you put it like that, we don't often reflect back.
No, I'm sure.
We do it has been a sense that we've made our journey.
Completely. I would say possibly uniquely, in that you kind of redefined the parameters of your discipline, and then you invented careers that no one else had previously, or probably is definitely ever going to have again. And then obviously people will be familiar with the television shows which continue, on both sides of the Atlantic. I think you've done all sorts of things in those spaces, but you did have one more crack. You did go back to Lilyhammer. How did that come about? Was it all? Did you have a sense of unfinished business?
That was Chris's fault.
No, it wasn't unfinished business, but we'd been professional for 10 years by that time, and we felt like we've done so much, and then they said we're changing the rules for 1 year only, because I think they'd lost a lot of personalities within the sport, and so they wanted to bring back familiar faces. And we'd been to an anniversary in Davos of the International Skating Union, and we were coming back down on the little train down the hill, and I said, do you know we could go back and do it? And she went, double take. No.
I said no.
And then you thought about it for a day.
By the time we'd flown home and that, it was like, maybe.
It might be easier.
But we had to be prepared to fail as well.
I think we were trying to measure ourselves of where we were again.
Well, we saw all the hard work we've done with professional shows, 8 shows a week, doing an Olympics where there's 3 sections to it.
Yeah.
It's got to be so easy. You do one event a day, one performance a day. And but then, as Chris mentioned before, along with that comes the politics, because you're jumping into a place that maybe other skaters are there in line to medal that year, but then someone else comes back, not just in the ice dance, in all the other categories. There was a bit of sort of resistance from some quarters, let's say.
And it was, it remains, I hadn't realised quite how febrile it was. Again, spoiler alerts, but you got the bronze, having won the British and the Europeans.
That's
of course.
Right, yeah.
And there was quite a lot of outrage back at home.
Yeah, that felt really good for us, the support that we got. It wasn't like, they failed. It was more like we was robbed.
Yes.
And so...
But when we planned to tour straight after anyway, and that tour was one of the most successful because, as Chris said, people came to show their support, and I can't tell you how many gold medals little children gave to me that they'd made at school, and they gave us, didn't they, at other side of the rink when we'd finished the show. So.
And then 98, you kind of knock it on the head professionally, I think.
We
tried to.
Yes.
We quietly said to ourselves, this is it, families and retiring. And so we remember that last performance, and we gave ourselves a hug and thinking that was it. But, a few years later, ITV came knocking and said, we've got this idea of taking celebrities and teaching them to skate, and what do you think? We said it won't work.
You got good lawyers.
And 16 series later, it's still going, and we've been doing that longer than our competitive career.
Have you really? Gosh, of course you have. And you've written another rule book, really, because as you say, there was no reason, it had no business being a success, this show, did it?
No, none at all.
And you've just finished, we've just finished watching the latest, which means that when you hit the road next year, marking 50 years together, it says here, which is impossible to believe looking at you both.
Thank you.
But it means that you're going to have that fantastic possibility of 3-4 generations of the same families all wanting to come and see you together.
I hadn't thought of it like that, but that is nice. Quite a wonderful thing to think about.
Yeah.
Grandmom, kids.
Yeah.
So what can people expect? You start in April. It's not completely cast in stone, is it? Because I know that there are some quite emotional venues that you might like to add to the list that I've got in front of me now.
I think we'd like to try and finish in Nottingham, although I don't know whether I should be saying that, but I'd like to think we would, because that's where it all started.
That would be very special.
Yeah, we want to make it sort of a celebration of our career. So I think it will be a story of how things came around and performing parts of it, and having other professional skaters with us to help us tell that story as well. So we want to use the word spectacular, but we want it to be a wonderful evening of entertainment.
We want to celebrate our career, but we want to say thank you to the audience for supporting us over the years, and that we're still able to do it.
Because
we can do it.
Yeah.
They really have supported you. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know what the best indicators are of the affection, because, it's a long time ago that you were Olympic.
It is a long time ago,
and yet,
yeah.
as we said at the very beginning, your names are still completely sort of synonymous with both success and the now, the modernity. It's you're still incredibly current people.
Well, as Chris said, with Dancing on Ice and 16 years of that sort of keeps you in people's living rooms when you're on a Sunday evening. But I have to say, the fans that we have, when there's not been many occasions that I can remember that fans haven't come up and been completely lovely and just wanted to say hello, and that they enjoyed watching it.
Yeah, and so you start in April of next year, Torvill and Dean at Our Last Dance. You can find out all the details in all the usual places. Is it really going to be your last dance?
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah. We still continue with Dancing on Ice as judges if the show continues. But I think from a live performance, then this will be the last dance.
Yeah, whilst the legs will still carry us, know.
Yeah.
And we also... that breath.
You need to step off the treadmill at some point.
I told Jayne, but me and my partner were buying a motorhome and we're going to go see England.
Oh, that'd be nice.
But
just
it only
travel around.
It doesn't have any spare rooms on it. So definitely.
So there's nothing. So if you see it in two acts, up until 84 and then after 84, up until 84, incredibly engineered, incredibly planned, every attention to after that you've allowed yourselves to be taken by surprise by things. Dancing on Ice most obviously, and the tour, I sense, will be the meeting of both worlds. There'll be
absolutely
which will be beautiful to watch.
I hope so.
It really will. I don't think either of you, looking back over the 50 years that you've been together, would change a single thing.
No,
that's extraordinary.
No.
Yeah, I think if some things don't go to plan or don't go as you expect them, I think we've always thought, we'll learn from that. Don't make that mistake again. And that's as basic as when we were training, learning new moves and understanding why it went wrong, and not making the same mistake again.
I've enjoyed this conversation so much.
Thank
I
you.
really have, and I enjoyed watching you. I didn't just watch Bolero last night. I watched a couple of other things as well. The only thing that surprised me when I was preparing for this was that people didn't really follow in your footsteps or follow in your skates as much as we might have expected. Like an entire generations who watched you, probably because there are so few ice rinks and so few structure in place.
Absolutely, it's the infrastructure.
Yeah.
I always say this, that if you look at the 2012 Olympics, of how successful we were. Why were we successful? Because money was put into those events. And it's the same with skating. It's still a poor relation in the sports world because we haven't got the success. You need the success, and people go, oh, we'll put some money that way because you've been successful. You need to put it into
isn't it?
the young kids, the infrastructure at the beginning, and support them all the way through.
Did you ever find out who the councillor was, or who the person was in Nottingham that took the final decision to sign that cheque? Or did it just come from a bureaucratic?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah,
I think
it would have been
a group of
committee.
We'll call it the City Council.
Jayne Torvill, Christopher Dean, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.